Library News Cafe. My name is James Jimmy Hills. I am the host of a local talk show called Java with Jimmy, which started during COVID. And we are here today in partnership with WGBH for the April Brew, as I would call it, for GBH Amplifies, James Jimmy Hills, host of Java with Jimmy. On my platform, which is an online sort of podcast, we engage with the public as we're getting ready to do right now. We are literally getting ready to go live. So please put your hands together as we begin the April Brew of Java with Jimmy. Welcome to the Java Cafe here. I just wanted to mention the reason that we're here today. A couple of weeks ago, or about a week or so ago, I observed an article that talked about what I would call sort of predatory practices, particularly in the Asian community here in Chinatown, but also understanding that some of the same practices are being utilized also in Quincy and I believe Malden as well. And not just within the Asian community, but BIPOC communities are being targeted and often have, I would say, a lot of added issues when it comes to addressing all types of addiction. But one we don't talk about often, and the one that the article talked about, is gambling addiction. And so I'll just say this now, through a relationship of couple of decades, I have known this young man that is going to be with us, one of my guests today, that is going to be with us for a couple of decades. And I'll be very honest, he attempted 10 years ago, when he first started this work, to bring this to my attention in general, but particularly within Black and brown communities around gambling addiction. And I'm like, Brother Victor, I'm dealing with issues of violence prevention, youth development, and things like that. Like, I don't think this is a real issue. I have to also admit, growing up, that it was a culture that you would see scratch tickets on the street. You would sometimes see them in the homes. And so inadvertently, I think that we are somewhat conditioned to maybe not recognize that there may actually be gambling addiction within our families and our community. And so with that being said, we're going to have a conversation today with Victor Ortiz, who is the director of the Office of Gambling Services, and then also Ben Hires, who is the director of, and I'm going to get in trouble for this because I never look at my notes, but he's going to tell you in a couple of seconds. Please put your hands together for my guest today. Ben, I'll start with you. If you could introduce yourself, and if you could, in your work, give me, after you greet the audience, give me one word for the status of gambling addiction. And I would say gambling addiction services, because in that article that I mentioned, this part I did not see as prevalent in what partnerships like this is doing. And so if you could give me a status of the services that are being offered in one word. Please greet the audience and welcome to the Java Cafe.
Thanks, Jimmy. It's a pleasure to be here. Hello, everyone. My name is Ben Hires, and I have the honor of serving as CEO for BCNC, Boston Chinatown Neighborhood Center. And I was hoping you were going to make Victor go first with the one-word thing, but I heard two questions. One word is how I might describe the state of gambling, especially vis-a-vis the Asian community. And you said it before, yes. And I'm going to say predatory. I'm going to say predatory. Now, I thought I heard you ask another question, which was about services and programs and hope that is out there.
Yes.
And the word that I would use for that is creative. I think I was listening to a conversation earlier about maybe you back in the day and how you thought outside the box.
This is why I saved Victor for last.
Yeah.
I'm still going to get it.
So in this work, like you said, people are not thinking about gambling as a problem. And we've got to be creative. We've got to be really creative in how we talk to our young people. We've got to be creative to our elders who've been doing this. This is the family thing we do, so we've got to be creative.
Okay. Brother Victor.
Hey, James.
Ben got me a little bit, and I reference to how long we've known each other, so we'll just get that out the way. But in your greeting, I know that may be covered, but if you could greet the audience and give me your word, and I would say, since Ben did 2 words, I would say you can give me 2 words. The first one would be where things started. Give me a descriptive word for that. And then give me a descriptive word, I would say for you, because you oversee this, give me a descriptive word for where services are now. Welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be, I'm so honored and a pleasure to be here, and thank you for the invitation.
Yes, sir.
And it's really a pleasure to be here. Regards to a word, let me start with the last question about where I see the work as far as from our vantage point at the Department of Public Health. It's about equity. It's about equity. It's the foundation in which our work stands on, and it's for the last 10 years. In regards to where we started, there are many words, but I would say missing, right? They were missing inclusion of people, missing of people of color, missing in regards to strategies that were effective. There was just a lot of missing components when I first arrived at DPH in 2016. And so we're proud that, now 10 years after the fact, we've invested over $66 million in communities, specifically communities of color, because we know historically that people of color are disproportionately impacted by this issue. And so we've taken a really proactive, deliberate, intentional approach to ensure that we allocate resources in communities of color, because we have a mandate in the legislation, and that is we have a mandate about mitigating the harms associated with gambling. That is in the legislation of 2011. That is in the legislation that introduced gambling in Massachusetts. And so I think about this often, about how can we do this work if we are to mitigate harm without including equity, right? We have to include equity in the context of this work. So that's something that we are currently invested in and have been traditionally, that is really the foundation of our work.
I want to, when you talk about equity, and I'm going to kind of go free here for a couple of seconds. Your word was predatory, and then your word was equity. And the thought that I had was, is equity a answer or the opposite of predatory practices, sort of in general, when you talk about marginalized communities? Victor, I'll start with you now. You sort of talked about it a little bit with the description of your one word, but give us some historical context on gambling. When you went in 10 years ago, and then also now, like 10 years ago, I'm old school. You technically, may have had to go to the casino or I mentioned scratch tickets, but, now there's an ability to very quickly. So give us a little historical context, save some of this, because we're going to talk about that at the end. And I want you all to know that we are going to spend some time talking about social media and our young people, because their brains are currently being developed, and social media is one thing, but if they're using social media and being lured into in a predatory way on their phone, that's a whole nother, we'll end that out in a few minutes. So give us some historical context of gambling, where it was when you went in and where it is now.
So prior to 2011, Massachusetts was a highly exposed state to gambling via the lottery and other forms of gambling. But with the passing of the legislation in 2011 that introduced casinos, we saw a rapid increase of gambling opportunities. So we saw casinos established, then we saw the sports betting, and we're probably, as a country, not only just in Massachusetts, in the greatest expansion of gambling opportunities we've ever seen, right? And so that has really created what I believe some new challenges that we've never seen before. On top of that, the other piece that's historical, that's really important, is that the field of gambling, the work of gambling, has been historically disconnected from the community experience of gambling and people of color, right? That's an important component.
Do me a favor, because I looked at you for a second to better understand what you meant by that. So go a little bit deeper when you say that the field of and there's a disconnect.
So the disconnect is because the predominant ideology in the gambling space is a term called responsible gambling. It is what's promoted by,
Understood. Yep.
so that's what's promoted. And it's really an ideology that has profound limitations. One, there's no empirical evidence that says that it works, number one, right? And so while there are many who will take the argument regards to responsible gambling, we saw an opportunity in 2016 when I arrived at DPH to say, let's do something different. Because problem gambling is a public health issue. So let's think about developing a model that really is about a public health approach to this issue. And it's a new concept, right, for a lot of people in this space that we got a lot of pushback, right? Why are you doing it this way? Why not think about the responsible gambling model? And so when we started to do this work, we said, here are our principles. Our principles is centering the work on equity because the field has been historically disconnected from and the reason for that, James, is this. You know, I grew up in social clubs, right? As a kid, grew up in Roxbury. I know and I understood clearly the intersectionality of problem gambling with substance abuse, prostitution, mental health, you name it, we saw it, right? It's all connected.
Sir.
And so that conversation was missing. And in the context of when we're talking about how do we mitigate that, it's like there was no understanding about our experiences at the table, how we understood gambling, how we interacted with this issue, how it manifests in communities, right? There was no understanding of that. And that's just not only in Massachusetts, that's all over the country, right? I'm one of the very few people of color in this country that speak into this issue. Like, it just does not exist, right? What we're doing at DPH is unprecedented. No one has ever sort of approached this topic the way that we're approaching it now. And that's why when you look at the outcomes of our work, this is like, we're like light years ahead of any other work that's happening in the country because of the way that we're doing the work in regards to a public health approach to this issue.
So based on that, of what Ben said, you said that your second word was creative. And equity and creative. Can you, Ben, talk to me, and if you want to either back up or respond to what Victor said, and then take us, you know, through an understanding of how things have changed over 10 years, and Victor talks about the disconnect. How has creativity, as an example of this type of partnership, how is that helping? And what other examples you may know about? But please feel free to respond to whatever Victor was saying.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate Victor mentioning the responsible gambling framework that the casinos support and put out there, because I think one of the dichotomies there is it makes you think of the onus is on the individual. You need to be responsible, you as a person. But what Victor's talking about is there are more forces out there. And this is what the Globe article really picks up hard about this. You know, yes, people are following and doing certain things, but there's a lot of other things happening. And talking about the individuals and the difference that's not working, and that's what's happening in the community is at BCNC, what we saw in Chinatown prior to 2011 when casino gambling was legalized, is we were seeing kids having challenges. So for example, we'd have a child in our after school program who was taking extra snacks. This kid was hungry. So we're saying, okay, what's going on? This kid needs extra snacks. Then you talk to the parents and you know, you get kind of a run around, but then eventually you find out there's not money for food at home. Or you're seeing a child having behavioral issues and you try to find out what's going on, and later you find out, well, there's domestic violence, there's relationship issues happening.
The intersection. So one thing I want to highlight is, you know, in a time that we talk about humanity, I just want to, and it's a high level thing, but I want to highlight that a lot of communities of color, BIPOC communities, are dealing with the same issues. How they demonstrate themselves, maybe according to the culture, may differ. So I just wanted to highlight that, because that's what Victor said about being in those social clubs. You're talking about maybe individual intersections of other things that may cause the individual maybe not to be as responsible because life is lifing. So I just had to interject that there.
So I think in terms of, you know, being creative is like, okay, it's not just about dealing with the parent or the grandparent in the house that's having a gambling problem. You know, you're dealing with family relations, you're dealing with housing stability, you're dealing with food insecurity and all of these issues. And so you need a very creative approach. It's not just getting somebody into therapy, though that's part of it. you need to deal with a family. You need to deal with the community.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think community-based organizations like BCNC and so many partners and so many partners that DPH works with is so important. You can't come from the top up on this.
And James, if I can add this, right? I think oftentimes, and this is important when we talk about creative, oftentimes, and we're guilty in state government being too prescriptive, right?
Not just state government, but I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, we're very too prescriptive, right? And so one of the things that I understood clearly is that the power was in communities, right? And so the programs that we have in place at the Department of Public Health that's funded by the Office of Problem Gambling Services, we started this journey by engaging the community, engaging the Asian American community, and saying what's working, what's not working, right? That we have engaged over 3,000 individuals, majority people of color, who have told us this is what we need, this is what works, and this what doesn't work.
So let me clarify something. When you said 3,000 individuals, these aren't necessarily services that you
No,
provided.
these are
this
community
is your
members.
engagement,
Engagement.
and intake on influence on how you operate?
Exactly. So one of our key strategies when we first started this work in 2016, I took it to the streets. I went to Springfield, Massachusetts, and engaged the community. Went out in Boston. We went out in different neighborhoods, and we started to do listening sessions to say how are we going to do this work together? Because here's the key. I believe that the intelligence is not on people like me, myself, and others in state government. It's in the community. All the programs that we funded currently right now has been informed by the cultural intelligence of the community.
So that's equity in
That's
action.
equity
But
in action.
when you say, cultural intelligence, the term itself is an equitable term,
Yeah.
If you will. And so, Ben, if I could ask you to just go a little bit deeper about maybe, and this is sort of an off-the-cuff question, but how can community kind of help support getting availability of information out? And I'm kind of getting a little bit ahead, but Victor said something that made me want to ask you just to tease a little bit, because there's the individual responsible gambling, but then we know about terms of codependency and addiction display. The way addiction displays itself and interacts with other people, the community around them is a part of that. So is there some responsibility that we have to help, to try, and is that making those that are dealing with it aware of the services? How do we do that better?
So I think one of the things that we've found, especially in the Asian community where gambling and other things have a huge stigma, mental health, people are not raising their hands and saying, hey, I have a problem.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
It's probably similar in a lot of communities.
Yes.
And so this, again, you have to be creative about how you can reach out and let people know that there is support and people love you and they care. All right? And so I think, on the ground, how that looks is we're doing karaoke, ping pong, Chinese dance. So we're saying, hey, we know that there's not a lot of places for you to go and do things that you care about and are fun and socialize. Because the casinos know that. And that's why they are pulling people to the slot machines and to the pag-out tables, et cetera. So our interventions is, hey, we're a welcoming, community-focused place. Come here, be a part of our community. You belong here. And once people get to know you, you don't go up to a stranger and tell them all your problems. You need to have a trusting relationship with people. They need to know you. They need to trust you, and that's what we do. And then once people, kind of get to know us, and you're the uncle, you're the auntie, then you can offer, hey, I heard you're having some trouble at home, or your son is dealing with this, or so on. And then we can say, hey, we have some services, we have some programs, we have people who understand. So that's the creative part. Not only literally like offering games and other activities that are healthy and safe, but then sort of going in the back door, gaining their trust.
To be able to share the information, but I don't want you to, because as you said that, I wrote a note that is creating, safe places, is creating more community, and that is a benefit that, of course, now you can share information. You could also be observant, and maybe we now can transition the conversation into, you can observe that you either have, this is not just, I don't want to sort of demonize our young people, it's not just young people. You'll be able to recognize if someone's always on their phone, or if they're on their phone and they have their card out and they're, making a bet or something. And so, Victor, I want to start with you now, and please feel free if you have any stats or want to share any data. But, our young people, and we're going to talk about, you mentioned our elders as well. We're going to talk about them as well. But are our young people, is this an issue for our youth?
It is probably the number one concern. Definitely the
Not violence prevention, not
No, it's the-
STIs,
it's
not
the number
teenage
one-
pregnancy.
Right now, the number one concern right now across many sectors is youth gambling. It's getting a lot of momentum.
To hear that Ben is with me.
Yeah.
There is a term, youth gambling.
Yeah. So we know from the data at the Department of Public Health that nearly sort of 49% of middle school students and about 46% of high school students have gambled within the last year. That trend has been consistent for 10 years. What is interesting in that data is that at some point in 2013, the prevalence rate for high school students gambling was higher than middle schools. But that shifted over the last few years. Now, middle school students are gambling at a higher rate than high school students, which tells us by the data that young people exposure and engagement and participation in gambling is getting younger.
So I have to, based on you said exposure, and let's go back to the word predatory.
Yeah.
How does that demonstrate itself in social media with our young people? And are you seeing that particularly within the Asian community or just in general by your work with Victor? How is it demonstrating itself with social media?
This is a current event thing, right? We just heard on the news, right, about YouTube, I think, and Meta being found guilty.
Yes.
Court
Yeah, I remember a
by-
recent story, yeah.
by the nature of how it works, it's being addictive. So social media is addictive. We know that. My phone somewhere is addictive. Gambling online, the casino gambling for adults, it's the same thing. You had Governor Healy on here with you recently.
Or in a different
Yeah,
iteration.
and you
yeah,
guys, you were talking about social media.
And
being
media
predatory.
literacy. Yes, and she mentioned
Targeting.
media literacy. Financial literacy, I'm sorry. Yep.
But these devices and these apps, they're the same. But
mention that.
they, on the ground, what we're seeing is they're innocent because there's no real money, but it's the activity of, trying to win something. Maybe some points, maybe it's gold coins that you can use for in a video game. So there's so much groundwork that seems innocent, but is grooming, quite frankly.
Another G word, and Victor can appreciate this from where we used to work together in substance use, is gateway.
Yeah.
Yes.
We used to say marijuana was, gateway drug.
Yes.
That sort of predatory behavior on social media toward our young people, that's that gateway. And as you said, the gold coins and whatnot, I'll be transparent and felt a little convicted. There's a couple of games that when I play them, and I see at the end the little gold coins go up into the little bag, I'm like, well, yep, that means I can either get more life later or something. So it's this, as I said before, it's not just our young people. So that sort of, let's go down this rabbit hole for a couple of seconds. Yeah. Either any data you have, or Ben, I believe you can speak to this a little bit, social media and the apps. Go ahead.
So I think this, let's take it up a level.
Okay.
We're living in an environment and a time where, and this is what our research found just in terms of the immigrant community, is isolated, siloed,
Yeah.
Post-COVID.
post-COVID.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's so much easier to be entertained or find even quote-unquote community online without ever leaving your bedroom or your couch. And what does that leave us acceptable for? False entertainment, false relationships. And so I think the social media landscape, and that's why, again, you're seeing this backlash also kind of in the headlines that, we don't want Chromebooks for our kids. We, are not giving phones to our kids till whatever age. But there's now a backlash because people are realizing this is really harmful.
As much as they thought at one point it was a babysitter, and Victor, you can follow up, but then I want to also just ask a little bit about, there's the entertainment and socialization piece that you said the predatory entities know about. We haven't talked about the fact that some people are actually doing this as a potential come up. I might win.
Yeah.
And I know for you all that may be an implied part of the addiction, But I think we need to say, based on the times of based on times and where we are, that's a. Would you agree that that's a factor too?
Yeah,
that you,
I think there's some undercurrent issues that I think are important to establish, right? Some from a public health perspective. Like, let's just take this issue and say, okay, what are the driving forces? Why are people making decisions to engage in gambling? And so what we know from data and research is that over 98% of people who have a gambling disorder or have a significant stressor with gambling had a pre-existing mental health and substance use disorder, right? And so, and then what are the factors that is driving the mental health and substance abuse? It's, poverty, it's issues of what we call these environmental factors or the social determinants of health.
Yes.
So when we take a sort of a deep dive into like, okay, there's all these things happening with gambling and the gambling opportunities and the exposures and things of that nature, why is some people who are engaging developing certain problems with this issue versus others? And a lot of it has to do with these undercurrent issues, right?
that were already there.
Yeah, that's already there. And so, to me, it's the reason why I really pound the table on this issue is because if you take gambling out the equation, let's look at communities like Chinatown, Roxbury, Dorchester, Springfield, Massachusetts, all these neighborhoods. We're experiencing great poverty, great distress, great mental health, great challenges throughout these communities. And so when you throw gambling into the mix, what is only amplifying the issues that we know are underneath it, right? And that's why the whole aspect of responsible gambling doesn't really work, because it's not really addressing gambling and the manifestation of gambling as we understand it, right? It's really about those underground issues. And so if we want to really rectify issues of gambling, here's what we need to do. We need to think about how do we elevate poverty in our city? How do we make sure that we know that the two leading risk factors that transition people from social stages of gambling to problematic stages of gambling is low education attainment and low economic status. So again, those are the drivers, right? And so to me, it's like, listen, I'm too old. I've been doing this a long time, Dan. We go back a long time, man, right? I've been doing this for 30. I've been doing this for 30 years as a social worker. And the reason why I came to DPH is because it was an opportunity for us to change the game, for us to be able to do something totally different on what I believe is a public health issue that needs to be addressed.
It is mental health as well.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's a financial issue. And Ben, I want to ask both of you, you can respond to that, and I'll hold my question around the impact of where things are. In our sort of pre-convo, we talked about that things are going to be very different in the city and in this state from a financial standpoint. We see that my local mayor here, Michelle Wu, there are budget cuts coming. Your boss and your big boss and whatnot, the legislature, they're working through some budgetary issues.
Yeah.
Respond to what Victor said, and then I want to go a little deep into what is the potential impact if we do not, one, with all due respect, and y'all know I love our governor and the legislature, get you some more money, and then also proactively, with getting you more money, you can expand relationships like you have with Ben. So Ben,
just really quickly, in 2020, we did a research project with Tufts University. The title of that research, and the Globe article refers to it, was Unpacking the Root Causes of Problem Gambling in the Asian Community. So to add some sort of deeper layers to that, and Victor touched upon this, low income jobs, restaurant workers. We did another research project with UMass that focused just on restaurant workers. And the connection there is they're working till midnight, low-wage jobs. What do you do at midnight when you want to decompress? Well, there's a bus there, take you to the casino, make you feel like a king. And that's where they go. They spend their paychecks, okay?
And or tips, if they're in the hospitality industry. Yep.
But for the Asian community, the immigrant community, language access to some of the services, language access to other entertainment and things that are more healthy. So these are the kinds of things that we observe. People talked about boredom. What they were really talking about is lack of opportunity. Lack of opportunity in their own neighborhoods, okay? So what we said is gambling is, and this reinforces what Victor said, gambling is just a canary in the coal mine.
Sir.
It's just a canary. It's not the real issue. What the real issue is what Victor was talking about. Jobs, healthcare access, educational opportunities,
Housing.
and basically just respect.
So these are the same things, and you talk about, the years of you being in this space. I've moved in the space of violence prevention for many years. I'm not sure what space you moved in, besides this, but the underlying issues
Are the same.
all fall back.
The same.
So as much as I said the legislature and the governor need to get you more money, I will say that also, when I talked about community and what we can do, we also have to be able to talk to our legislators and others about being very aggressive. This is, if you will, sort of a byproduct or of these underlying issues. But until we get there, I do want to begin to talk about services.
Yes.
Like with Ben, you partner with him for creativity, but Brother Victor, please, what are some of the other services that your office may not provide directly, but give us an example of some other creative partnerships that you have outside of
our services run a spectrum, right? We fund prevention programs, treatment programs, we fund community-based services. So we fund a whole spectrum of probably on an average about over $30 million on an annual basis, right? But the new thing I want to talk about that's not sort of connected to service is that we expanded our office to think about research and surveillance, because it's imperative that we understand, that we monitor what the
Hold on,
impacts
stop. I'm sorry. Research, I get. Surveillance has so many implications based on the practices in predatory.
Well,
surveillance.
but it's a fundamental public health practice. What we want to do
okay.
it's not surveillance.
That part of
electronic.
surveillance.
Okay. We understand what surveillance is in the hood, but what I'm
From a
saying,
public health
from a
standpoint,
public
gotcha.
health perspective, what we're talking about is we need to understand what are the trends year over year, what age groups, what groups of people are being impacted, because it allows us to be able to make the investments where we see the greatest impacts, right? And so that's important. We have systems of surveillance for STDs, for HIV,
Exactly. Yes.
in public health.
Yep.
There's no system of monitoring / surveillance of problem gambling in this country. It does not exist. So we can talk about this issue from an opinion perspective, right? Like what we think are the impacts, who's being impacted. But we need to really dive deep and say, okay, let's look at what communities are being impacted, who's being impacted, so that we can, at the department, say, here's how we want to be able to spend some dollars and to mitigate harm.
If I could ask a question, and it's not a pushback, but I said a few weeks ago when the city of Boston released the information about black health and black men's health, and I'm curious to know if there's any surveillance in there about, do you feel that you are dealing with gambling addiction? Anyway, I found myself lately saying, similar to our Congresswoman a few years ago, that I've been saying we don't need any more data. We know what the issues are. You all have named housing and opportunities and things like that. May I ask that based on the data we have in the spaces that you say that need to be addressed, is there enough to extract from there? One, you don't mind to put a shout out to all of our researchers. We know we need to keep you engaged, but you don't, expend dollars into research that if you look at some of the other spaces, the research is there. That was just a thought.
Yeah, but the difference in gambling is this. Here's the difference, right? While we know in health, in general health, there's a lot of data and a lot of research, right? And we just talked about that whole connection of the intersectionality between gambling and related issues. And you can look at different data in substance abuse, mental health, violence, things of that nature, and you can start to see there's a pattern and there's a theme going on. But with research in gambling, goes back to my earlier point. It's been historically disconnected from the community experience of gambling and people of color. So when we look at the research in this country, and even here locally in Massachusetts, it doesn't represent people of color, right? And so then the question becomes, it's a big void, a void that we need to really understand. How are youth being impacted? What are the trends? And so we started at the Department of Public Health saying, this void, we're going to fill it. Okay. Because we need to fill that void in order to better understand what is going on.
It's meeting people where they are.
Yeah,
It's me- and this is a-
we need to know that in order to respond in a more effective way.
And I think that the problem, as I mentioned, in the Asian community has been there for a long time. It's actually not, I would say, argue, it's not until Victor started supporting programs like BCNC to do something about it.
With the
that-
research and
with the
surveillance.
research, but actually on the ground, the creativity, et cetera, that we could actually raise the visibility of this and have that conversation. So I think it's exactly what we're talking about. Because otherwise, if Victor didn't come along and DPH started asking what the community needed, we wouldn't have had that three-part series under the globe. People would still thought, oh, that's just what they do. No,
And that's part of the research. When we first started to do work in the Asian American community, which is part of this surveillance, is that we engaged the community to say to them, what's working, what's not working. And then that's part of the surveillance, is understanding what's happening on the ground. And so when I arrived at DPH, there was $0 of funding at Chinatown, zero, not a dime, right? Our office has been able to change that reality from $0, and now it's on an average of almost $3 million on an annual basis, dedicated
Not
specifically.
one-time investment.
No, these are ongoing investments with the Asian American communities. And and not only that, it's not just the investments with the programs, but it also is about ensuring that when we have services, that we make sure that there's language access, that there's participation. Ben and his team has been able to join our treatment services and saying, how can we make sure that we get Asian languages and things of that nature, and build their capacity to be able, because that to me is about equity, right? And it's all about working together to accomplish that.
We're going to get ready to wrap up in a few minutes, but we're going to also make sure that people understand, and I'll say it right now just in case you have to log off early, and I should have actually said it a couple of times. If you need services, or if you know someone that needs services, you want to call the helpline at 1-800-327-5050. Again, that number is 1-800-327-5050, and we'll be sure to name that again. Brother Victor and Ben, here's my concern along with what I said a few moments ago. Things are going to be very interesting in a lot of communities, marginalized communities, in the next year or so. When you talked about the public health perspective of this, I move in the space of wellness and mental health. I have doctors on all the time to talk about medicine. The cyclical problem I'm seeing here is the gambling addiction unaddressed. You're gambling, you lost money, so now, though you had that wonderful predatory bus ride up there, I don't know if they're taking you home. And then on the way home, you have to figure out how you're going to tell your family or loved one that you don't have the money, that stress, which wears on the body. Then you have the financial impact. And so how do we get in front of and proactively with, I know they may not call it DMH anymore, but DMH, your office, community, you all have proven that you are well invested in bringing the community in. But is there any planning where there's a collaborative sort of approach from a mental health standpoint, a public health standpoint, and also, as the governor said, she now wants, I saw the Secretary of Workforce Development the other day. It's going to wind up going in education, but financial literacy as well, because I believe that in these times, there may need to be part of the curriculum that talks about, at their apropos level, but gambling. And so how do we begin to prevention in context of where we are as a nation and where we may be as a city and state financially?
One of the things that's really important for me and important for us is that collaborations is really at the center of what we do. And so it's important that we not only continue the strong partnerships at the community level, but we continue our strong partnerships with various other players in this space. And so I think we have the ingredients to continue to strengthen collaborations, and this work is going to take all parties, from our regulatory folks who are at the Mass Gaming Commission and their role as a regulator in this space, the Attorney General's office and sort of their role, and other of my colleagues in state government, whether there's DMH or there's other offices. And we got to continue to find ways to strengthen relationships in order to collectively mitigate this harm. And I think that is happening, right? I think slowly but surely in some areas it is happening because this issue, although it's not new, but it's new to Massachusetts, right? But here's the thing. The legislation gave us the resources to get this work done via the Public Health Trust Fund. And this was under the Patrick administration when the casino legislation was passed. This Public Health Trust Fund allows for the Department of Public Health to do the work that we are currently doing and allows us to be able to put those monies in communities. So it's imperative that we preserve that trust fund, right, and make sure that that trust fund continues to be funded so that we can turn around at DPH and use those resources to make investments in Chinatown and in communities throughout the state in order to do this work and do it effectively. But I do think that we do have pieces of the puzzle. It's about really continuing to figure out ways to continue to work together and making sure that this work gets done in a way. And I think there's a lot of new stuff. I think a lot of stuff for people is like, the way we do this work, when I first started, they were like, what are you doing? You know, public health, really? Gambling? People think about this issue in isolation. I think now people are saying, oh, what you've been saying for 10 years, you're right. Let's figure that out now. Exactly. I'm like, yeah, I've been here for a minute. I've been telling y'all. But the people are now gravitating to what we're doing. And I think eventually what DPH is going to be is that we're going to be that hub. We're going to be that hub for relationships. We're going to be that hub for data. We're going to be that hub for research. We're going to be that spoke to help people in community engagement. We're going to be that hub that's really going to be able to bring this work into an area that we can sort of work together to mitigate harm.
I don't know if Dr. Goldstein is watching, but you just did a whole wonderful, hi Robbie, you just did a whole spiel for DPH, which and as it should be. And so I'm going to ask to make sure the producers don't put Brother Victor on camera as Ben and I have a conversation. Victor can't participate in. How important to that point about, see, you're like me. I see you tapping the desk. How important is it that fund and the legislature support this and continue to give not just Victor's office as they should, but the Department of Public Health to be able to address the underlying issues that we talked about, but this one in particular, you can definitely speak to that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Say what needs to be said.
And I appreciate you sort of tap dancing a little bit throughout this conversation. So I'll drop some knowledge here. About 1.2 billion with a B, $1 billion goes out of the state through casino gambling, okay? 1.2 billion.
Out of the state?
MGM, Wynn Casinos, these are publicly traded companies that, I don't know, Nevada, wherever they're at. Out the door, out of the pockets of our communities, quite frankly. There is taxes, there's the Public Health Trust Fund, there's other taxes, right? For every dollar that goes out of the state, about 28 cents stays here and helps with programs like BCNC and other things that DPH funds and other stuff, right? Now, the new thing is sports betting. Sports betting is growing month over month. Over I got it here, 619 million just in February was generated. And now it's March Madness getting done. I'm sure the numbers are going to be higher. 619 million.
For clarity, based on your last stat,
Yeah.
that 619 million generated within Massachusetts, not going out. Or you don't know?
It's generated here, but it goes out. I mean,
Part of
FanDuel
it
and all
goes out.
those
Yeah.
are here.
So sort of the same model, but you don't have the right
But
number.
sports betting, for every dollar that's generated, only 2 cents goes to taxes here to support the Commonwealth. Senator John Keenan down in Quincy, he has new legislation that he's proposed
You
called
got a bill number?
the 302, S302, the Betters, get it? Betters Health Act. And his number one point is to increase the sports betting tax to match what other states are doing, like New York and New Hampshire. They're getting taxed about 20% right now. He wants to do 50. And you know where some of that needs to go and will go? It's public health. It will go to the communities. So rather than 2 cents, hopefully we'll get 3 cents. But this is what's happening. This money is coming out of our communities. You said you see scratch tickets and other things.
Yeah.
That's where it's at. The lottery. The top 4 cities where lottery is taken out: Boston, Worcester, Springfield, Quincy.
Have you done any comparison to the poverty median, homeless?
Well, I
housing
mean, you know
and-
Boston.
Yep.
You grew
yep,
up here.
Yes.
You know Worcester. You know Springfield.
Yeah.
Yep.
Quincy, 30% of the population Asian. They've done heat maps of where the lottery's ticket sales are. They're all places you grew up,
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
come to.
It's
So the point is that there are things happening. There are people who care.
yes.
BCNC and other partners. We got to talk. Our partners are the legislators. People we elect to represent us, to protect us, to protect the communities. So those are some of the things that we're focused on. But there's other things that Better Betters Act is trying to do to help protect people.
And it's S would be Senate bill.
Senate.
Senate 302. Let me also ask you this: what is it? Are we at a point where? And again, y'all don't. This is Ben and I. We need to contact our legislators. At what
So
level?
Victor mentioned the Mass Gaming Commission, which we've partnered with. Their mission, and I wrote it here, their mission is to regulate legal casino, gambling, horse racing, sports wagering. The second sentence of their mission is, their goal is to maximize consumer protections, minimize negative impacts. Okay? That's the first 2 sentences of their mission. The Globe article talked about things that are happening that don't feel like we're fully protected. Why are the buses coming into Quincy, Boston Chinatown, and Malden? They're not
haven't
going
made
to
it-
Lexington. They're not going to Wellesley. They're not, they have a lot of Asians in Lexington. So these are the kinds of protections that we're trying to raise, that we've talked about in some of the research. I've taken people on the buses to open their eyes. I've taken them to the casino floors, and it's very obvious who's there.
Yeah.
We're talking about their elders, we're talking about
Yes.
people disabled, we're talking about our veterans,
Yep.
and we're talking about people of color. It's very clear. It's not hidden.
So with that commission piece, there probably at some point will need to be maybe some advocacy when it comes time to either re-regulate them, or as commissioners are being, appointed as well, making sure that there are commissioners that are part of that commission that are aware of it. You should be a commissioner.
I think the next meeting's like
Or you
April
come,
9th.
you come with you got an activist
open
background.
public meeting,
Open public meeting. Okay. Brother Victor, we would like to give you the opportunity to close out. I'm going to mention a number, and you can mention it as well. But with this conversation today, it's not going to be the last conversation I have in this space, but we just want to remind you before Brother Victor does the closeout, before I officially close out, that number is 1-800-327-5050. 1-800-327-5050. That's the number to call to get services. You may be an entity or a nonprofit that may want to be connected to either grant opportunities or maybe partner with Ben or other entities to at least raise information in your churches, in your synagogues, and also in your mosque as well. Not just about or for those that may be addicted or dealing with it, but for the family and friends and loved ones that may have influence to make an observation and bring the resources to them. Brother Victor, your final words. What are our marching orders? And I'm gonna put you on the spot. What are our marching orders? And if you had the magic wand
Okay.
I said put you on the spot.
Yeah, you did put me on the spot there.
And Omar going to get me later, but
Yeah. We are celebrating this year our 10th year anniversary, and I am forever grateful to have been in this role for the last 10 years. Problem gambling is a public health issue, and it requires...
say it again for the people in the back. One more time.
Problem gambling is a public health issue.
One more time.
Problem gambling is a public health issue.
Say it with him, everybody. Problem gambling is a public health issue.
And it requires public health strategies. And so we are in a position at the Department of Public Health to continue to meet the challenge in this day and time by ensuring that we take the resources and that we allocate them in the areas that are most needed, and ensuring that we are inclusive, that we are respectful, and that we are engaging communities. And I'm proud, these are the things that I'm really proud of at the office, is that over the last 10 years, we've engaged over 3,000 community members that has informed over 23 initiatives, and that we've invested over $66 million that has employed over 230 people on the streets that's doing this work right now. That is equity in action. And so what I ask of people is support us, support the work, be aware of this issue, join us, because it takes all of us to do this work and do it effectively. So if you have any questions, reach out to us, reach out and learn more about what we're doing and how you can be a part of the solution, because it's going to take all of us to really continue to mitigate these harms.
Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Ben Hires and Victor Ortiz. What we are walking away with today is an understanding that yet once again, that Black and brown and BIPOC communities, when it comes to issues of predatory practices, most of the predators just come to us. Maybe other communities don't even deal with it. This is a issue that is a byproduct. Problem gambling is an issue that's a byproduct, as my guests have referred, that stem from and are heavily influenced by things like poverty, not having a lot of opportunities for employment, and not having the best opportunities for education. So there is that underlying that needs to be addressed. However, until then, it is imperative that we support Senate Bill 302 that is being offered by Senator Keenan out of Quincy. And I'll be sure to get you all more information about that, and we'll need to, can you make a connection and we'll get them on the show, to support that. And then also, when you hear about events or activities that are being sponsored by agencies, and at some point I'll ask Lorena or McKenna to get me either a list, or I'll put it on my website, of other BENs throughout the communities, so you can reach out to take advantages of the impact of a creative partnership between the Office of Gambling Services and 3,000, not direct service, 3,000 inputs into what this office has produced. So please make sure you follow Java with Jimmy on all social media platforms, and please plan to join us again on Thursday, May 7th, 2026, here at Java with Jimmy Amplifies James Jimmy Hills, host of Java with Jimmy, here at the Copley Library at the News Cafe. Thank you. Before I go, I would like to thank the folks at the Department of Public Health and also Argus Communications and Scales, Brother Omar, Lorena as well, and then also Dana and McKenna, and the wonderful production staff here at GBH Amplifies. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you on May 7th.